Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a very awesome knife video for you. This is the Tighe and Friends Tighe Fighter. Now Tighe and Friends because this is a Midtech rather than a Tighe Custom. And it's really, this is a pretty cool option because in the Midtech marketplace, there's a lot of the same kind of stuff going on. Now in high-end production, yeah, we're getting some variation from Custom Knife Factory and Riat Knives and now We Knives, which I haven't tried yet, but I'm really excited to get my hands on something from them. But in the Midtech market, and especially in USA made stuff, there is not a lot that's super compelling. Now I will say I'm pretty interested in the Formax. They're not for sale anywhere right now. The first run kind of sold out, and anyway, this one is cool because it's something different. There's no stainless, there's no stonewashed titanium anywhere on this. The handle is in fact the opposite of a lot of Midtechs. You have a lot of detail here, really compelling, interesting stuff going on. And of course, this is made in the USA. And so there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. And I think this is a great option if you're sort of in the market for the next step up. You want something a little higher end than a ZT or Microtech, but maybe you don't want to go to a full, $500, $600, $700 Ferrum Forge or Koenig knives or something like that. So great option, I think, for that kind of part of the marketplace, and hopefully this marks some different stuff happening in the high-end knife sort of arena. Now, let me specifically talk about this knife and about Brian Tighe. Brian Tighe, good Canadian guy, lives over in just outside of Stoney Creek, Ontario, and his knives are often, very different and compelling and artistic. But what's cool about his designs is, even with all of that, he's still able to put together something that functions very well. And this kind of fits that. You see there's a lot of lines and milling and decorative pivots and an interesting grind and all kinds of stuff that makes the knife very compelling. But when you get it in your hand, you go, it's extremely comfortable and it's super useful. It works in addition to, looking cool. It also functions extremely well. All right, so let me get into size and weight, and now that we've kind of talked a little bit about some introductory stuff, and then we'll move over to a closer up view so I can really share with you some of the really awesome details on this knife. So size and weight on this. There is a smaller version that's a little over 7 inches with a 3-inch blade. This is almost a 4-inch blade, 3 5/16 with a 5 1/8 inch handle. All right, it is an aluminum handle, and because of that, it's not overly heavy. It's basically about a 5-ounce knife, which is not bad at all. All right, and so really, to me, this is a great size, like just under 9 inches. You've got just under a 4-inch blade. Really, really cool knife, nice and big, which you guys know I love, but not overbearing or anything like that. Still very carryable, very comfortable in pocket. And if I'm honest, I've had a bunch of knives come in that I really should be carrying and testing so I can get reviews out to you guys, but I have had this thing in my pocket every day since I got it. I just am really, really enamored with it. One other note here before we get out of this section, you may have seen a different knife than this in some of my earlier videos, and that was because when I initially ordered, I got it on the first run, but they didn't have exactly what I had ordered. So they emailed me and said, hey, is this okay? And I said, yeah, that's fine. It was gonna be, or what I thought was gonna be, a drop point stonewash blade rather than the polished blade. And I said, yeah, that's okay. When it came, it was a Tanto, and the grind was not where I needed it to be for the price point, and so I contacted David from Tighe and Friends. He was really, really good, and so let me say, I do now have the knife that I was initially interested in, and I've got to give full credit to David over at Tighe and Friends. That the customer service was absolutely outstanding in getting figured out how making sure that I got the knife that I was happy with. So. Really, really, you know, I cannot say anything negative about that aspect of the experience at all. However, I can say something positive about having the knife that is exactly what I wanted. I'm super stoked about it, and have been really, really enjoying carrying and using this knife. Now let's switch over to a closer up view. And by the way, I know I'm 5 minutes in and we've just done the introduction, but I feel like this is a substantial enough knife, both in terms of what it's doing, and it's interesting and different and expensive, so it's worth spending some time on. Okay, here we are with a zoomed in shot on the, or a top down shot on the Tighe and Friends Tighe Fighter, and we're going to go over the details of this blade, starting with the blade the way we always do, and then working our way toward the handle. All right, so let's start off with this 154 cm drop point blade. It does come in a stonewash finish, or this polished stonewash, and I definitely really like that polished stonewash. Really, really nice finish, and a very durable finish, which, you know, for me, when if I'm going to spend a lot of money on a knife, I don't want to have to be constantly stressing out over, you know, any little minor scratch or mark. And so a finish like this really allows you a lot of confidence in using the knife, because any scratching or marking that does happen is really not going to show very easily at all. Very thick piece of 154 cm, and if I did have a little bit of a complaint here, it would be that steel could be a little better. You know, in a mid-tech knife, we're used to seeing at the very least S35 VN, and often better than that, right? Through M390 or CTS XHP or 204P, or anyway. 154 cm is not the end of the world. It's just not anything, you know, super impressive. Now, there are a lot of things that are super impressive about this knife, but the steel is just not one of them. And by the way, it's not a bad steel by any means, and I certainly am not saying that it's not going to hold an edge well, or there's going to be some performance related issue. It's really just a matter of at this point being a steel snob, but the reality, it would be kind of nice to see just a slightly better steel in the blade. The other complaint I have is the way that the heel is ground, and this is, you know, just a result of the way this plunge grind was done. And here's what I would have liked to see here. If this grind, see how this, follow this line right here. Now just imagine, instead of going that way, it came in here close to the handle and kind of went up a little bit higher. I think that would have allowed for a more consistent secondary bevel. See how on the heel there, the grind rides up because of the extra thickness back here. Okay, so it would have been nice to see that just a little more nicely finished, or a little more well thought out. But it in no way affects the performance of the knife. So we really, you know, these are what you call nitpicky type of issues. All right. So yeah, otherwise I love the blade. The thing that really makes this awesome for me is the fact that you've got this super thick piece of blade stock, but this knife also achieves an extremely usable, fine edge because of the fact that it's a hollow grind. So a hollow grind does allow you the freedom to go really thick on your blade stock and still end up with a very usable, very slicey knife. Now, that's going to be true for probably 95% of your cutting tasks. The only area I could see, and in fact the only area I have had a little bit of an issue, and it's not really an issue, but because this blade is quite thick, the other day I was cutting up some apples, and you really can't get apple slices very well with this because it's so thick that it wants to break off the pieces of apple before, you know, you've sort of got this wedge effect happening, right? But really everything else I've cut, cardboard and wood and everything else, this is performed amazingly well because of that hollow grind, achieving a really nice thin edge geometry. Okay, so that's the blade. I gotta say, I'm a big fan of this blade, and I have gotten quite a bit of use on it, and can attest to the fact that it's an extremely useful, versatile, tough blade shape. Oh, I guess I should point out one more thing before we leave here. Notice that the way this great blade is ground provides a lot of material out here at the tip. So you're getting a very strong blade as well. And that's why I like hollow grinds, because you can get a really thick, hefty, strong blade that still slices really well. And maybe you remember me talking about that on the Medford knife and tool review, where that was again a really thick blade stock, but also sliced quite nicely. Now, what about lockup and deployment? Well, you can look down here into the knife and you can see that button lock mechanism. And it does work very well. Really strong mechanism, and really the only thing about a button lock is this: it takes a pretty high degree of precision. And in something like this, or I do have one other example, something like this, a button lock is extremely strong, extremely reliable, okay? Sometimes in some more budget-friendly models, you may have had button locks before where there's a little bit of up and down blade play, and that's because a button lock does require pretty fine, pretty specific tolerances, but of course this knife has those, and so the button lock is great. Now, the other cool thing about the button lock, and this is from Brian Tighe's own words, okay, is that because a button lock doesn't take up a lot of space. So, you know, if you look kind of at my fingers there, the only place that's affected by this button lock is this little section of the knife right here, okay? There's nothing back here required. There's no springs, there's no bars, there's no nothing. It's just this one little piece of the knife, which allows you great freedom in design to do all kinds of things with whatever else whatever else you want to do on the knife, because you're not trying to accommodate you're not trying to accommodate a large lock bar. You're not trying to worry about how it's going to attach to the handle and how it's going to look and where the pocket clip is going to land and all kinds of other things. Those things become irrelevant by switching to the button lock mechanism, right? By the way, this is my Microtech DOC. Another good example, or another example that I can share with you is, on the ZT, again, you can see that on this side, there are a number of things affected where the pocket clip goes, how everything is going to come together is influenced by that frame lock. And so the button lock, because it takes up no space at all, allows a great deal of latitude. By the way, you can see this is a free dropper. It is on bearings, okay, and works really well. There's not a super huge amount of detent, but there's more than enough that it's effective, okay. And I don't know exactly how to describe the detent on this. It's not that it's super soft. It's just not super crisp, if that makes sense. If you ever felt a trigger that, the trigger pull may be hard, it could have a 6, 7, 8, 9 pound trigger pull, but it's sort of a soft trigger pull. That's sort of how I would describe the detent on this knife. It's sort of just there. It's not a super crisp break that you feel when the detent releases. And for me, that's not an issue, okay? Now, I will be interested to see Hogue has a new design for their button lock. I'm trying to think of the name, the X5, where they've done something different to achieve maybe a little more detent or a different feeling detent. I don't know, we'll see how that goes. But on this knife, flips really well, deploys really well with your thumb. By the way, notice this is left-handed and it's not giving me any issues whatsoever. So I've got no issues with the detent. I've got no issues with the way it locks up or the deployment. You will get a little bit of lock stick from time to time, but essentially, to kind of wrap this part up, you have a very nice, well-functioning, very firm button lock with a ball bearing pivot system. So really nice smooth action on this knife. Let's move on into the handle, and we want to spend a little bit of time here because of the fact that this handle is just so darn cool. All right, notice, of course, the very detailed milling in the aluminum there. This happens to be the gray. This also comes in a black, but one of the things I really like about the gray is that you get this nice contrast between the gray color and the black backspacer. Both of them are sort of a matte color. They're not really shiny or anything like that, which I actually think is really nice. And of course, the knife is called the Tighe Fighter. And I think I've got, I hope you'd agree with me. Certainly I can see sort of that dark, Imperial Star Wars-esque influence going on with this knife. And of course, even the decorative pivot screw and the proprietary screw here, and there is one on this side, you just can't see it because of the clip, and the little symbol there. Those are all kind of a nod to the Imperial symbol from Star Wars. They're not exactly the same, and I'm sure if they were, there would be the potential for some licensing issues there. But it is sort of, you know, reminiscent of that symbol. I'll zoom in here so you can kind of take a look at it. There you go. That's the symbol I'm talking about right there. Okay, so we're just kind of dealing with handle details. I will point out one thing that could have been a little nicer as far as I'm concerned. Now the ergonomics on this I'll speak to in a second are phenomenal, but notice right here. Now actually start here. Notice on this side you've got this nice lined flat surface that comes up here over the knife and looks really cool. You've got this step up pattern, which again looks really sharp. But then there's this space milled out here to allow for the button to be compressed, okay, which is good. We want that. However, on the other side, okay, there's no button, but there's still the space milled out to allow for the button. And, you know, really I can just imagine someone designing this knife in a CAD drawing, and of course when you're finished this side of the handle, which is the show side, right, then, you know, you're going to draw a line, you're going to mirror this to create the other side. Done, right? A nice simple command in AutoCAD and you're finished, except now you end up with the milling that allows for the button on this side as well. And so I would have liked to have seen that sort of filled in so that this space wasn't here. What it reminds me of now is, have you ever had a car where you didn't get all the options? And so there are like places where, you know, there are supposed to be buttons there. Maybe it's the heated seat button or the moonroof button or whatever. You don't have the moonroof, but there's just this empty spacer stuck in there. And it sort of reminds me of that, having this empty space over on this side. Now, it doesn't affect the comfort of the knife. It doesn't really, and honestly, unless I pointed it out to you, you probably wouldn't have seen it. It's certainly not at the end of the world or some big complaint that I think just has to be made different. But it just kind of, it's something that you notice if you've been playing with the knife and using it for a little while. Let's go and talk now about ergonomics, because the ergonomics on this knife are absolutely phenomenal. And we've talked about this in the introduction. Brian Tighe does a great job of making knives that look phenomenal. They look really artistic and really different and really cool. But the danger with that kind of design is that you put form over function. And in this case, that is not what's happened. In fact, in general, Brian's designs don't do that. They function really, really well, even though they look really different and really interesting. And so you have a knife here that looks really, really impressive, but when it comes down to how it actually performs in hand, it's extremely comfortable. It locks you right in. I've said this before about knives, but sometimes you grab a knife and it feels like the knife grabs you back, and this is a knife like that, okay? Even in terms of, notice here where the flipper tab goes in, he's actually left a little space for your finger there. We've pointed that out on knives before, and that's just a really nice touch. And there are a lot of those really nice little fine detail touches that really add something to this. Again, the patterned backspacer, or the sort of wave on the backspacer here, almost borrowing an idea from the mill pattern backspacers you see on some knives, but doing it kind of in his own way. Again, it looks really cool. It contrasts really nicely with the gray, and it feels good in hand. One last thing about ergonomics before we leave that part of the discussion, and that is the pocket clip. We'll talk about the pocket clip in terms of functioning as a pocket clip, but I think as a part of the design and as a well thought out piece of the handle, it works really well. When you grab this knife either in right hand or left hand, you really don't notice the pocket clip at all. It just disappears, which is exactly what you want, okay? Now, I will say this, because of these finger choils, you know, this knife really guides you into a saber grip or a hammer grip. for like draw cuts or something like that. Or reverse grip is okay. All right, I'm trying to get it where you can see there. Reverse grip is okay. The only time this is really sort of uncomfortable is a draw cut, and that's not really a grip we find ourselves taking. And certainly one of the implications of the name Fighter is that you've got this very deep choil and this pronounced sort of, I guess, these 3 finger choils where it's really going to grip your hand, and that's part of the deal when you look at a knife that's labeled a Fighter, is you're going to see that kind of design on the handle. So very, very comfortable. Now let's spend just a little time talking about this clip, because I've got to say I love it from a number of aspects. I love the look of it. I love how you've got this sort of Y shape with the attachment here. I love the added detail of the ceramic ball bearing. And so from just a design standpoint, from the look of the knife, it's really, really cool, and it really pulls everything together and fits in really well. In addition, though, it also works well, and a number of things that, or there are a couple of main things that make it work so well. One is that ball bearing. That really makes it come in and out of pocket nicely. And then I'll show you here how much room you've got for standoffs. Then where these standoff screws, or collars I guess with screws, are located, right near the tip here, it means this knife actually carries really deep, and it's achieved a very deep carry without doing sort of one of those fold over clips that we're used to seeing for a deep carry clip. Okay, so really you can see that this knife is almost gone when you put it in your pocket, of course, except the fact that the clip is fairly pronounced. But nice deep carry, great in and out of pocket, you know, no issue, largely because of that bearing. And so in terms of what's going on with the handle, again, very, very well done. Total win. You know, I was a little nitpicky with this little milling piece right here, but overall, again, just like with the other components, just like with the blade, just like with the lock, just like with the action, the handle is very well done. There's really nothing that I can point to on this knife and say, you know, this is a real failure, or this really needs to be improved. Everything is more than adequate and really quite well done. And of course, when you take a look at this whole package, which is what we want to do sort of in the overall impressions, I should pull in a couple of other knives just to give you a sense for size. Okay, so you can see it's around the same size as a 0560, so that's a really well-known knife. A lot of people, if you don't have one, you're at least familiar with it, and these are very close in size to one another. The 0560 being just a teeny bit bigger. All right, there it is beside another aluminum handled knife, the Microtech DOC, and the DOC is substantially larger. It doesn't look that way because of the camera angle, okay, but the DOC is a much bigger knife. Let's pull in a knife that I kind of feel like is a comparable option. This is the Hogue EX01. Again, the Hogue is a little bit bigger, but not a lot. But you do have, you know, the aluminum handle and the 154 cm steel and the button lock. So kind of interesting how much similarity these two actually have. One more, I guess we should pull in a Para 2 just because everyone is so familiar with the Paramilitary 2 in terms of size, that should give you a good idea there of what you're dealing with. What I want you to notice there is the fact that this knife, you know, stands out compared to some of those others in terms of the detail, the intricacies of the design, the fact that everything is just well thought out and comes together really nicely. I can tell you that this knife in hand, if I had you close your eyes and you felt every one of those knives, this one is one that you would immediately feel like this is meant to be in a human hand. This is phenomenal, and it is very, very good ergonomically. Also, in terms of price point, this is a knife that comes in at, for a mid-tech, a fairly reasonable price. Now, I know a lot of you are going 350 bucks. That's not reasonable by any definition of reasonable. But if you compare it to other mid-tech knives, you know, you're a good $150 to $200 cheaper than really the next, you know, sort of US made mid-tech that I can think of. You know, if you start looking at stuff from any number of different companies that are doing mid-techs, you know, you're pretty well at $400, really $450 and up. And so this is coming in at $350, which is really, really comfortable for someone who wants to kind of get into a mid-tech knife, sort of step up from production to mid-tech / high-end production. At this point, those lines are pretty blurred. But yeah, really, really great knife. What's the other thing that is really cool and what's really appealing to me overall about this knife is that you've got a piece here that is very artistic and very different and very cool and interesting. There's a lot of stuff going on, but at the end of the day, it's still a cutting tool. It fits your hand extremely well. It comes out of, you know, it deploys and comes in and out of pocket extremely well. It cuts well. It's tough. The blade is both durable and useful. And so you have a great combination of function and form here. A knife that really looks cool and is going to be to not only knife people, but even non-knife people, this knife is going to be like, whoa, that is a cool blade. But for someone who is just assessing it as a tool, it's also phenomenal in terms of its cutting performance and its comfort in hand and its deployment and all of those things. So overall, this is just an all-around really, really great knife. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will talk to you soon.